mock exercise, we're going to take a look at a case called Safe Writer. And this case allows us to investigate cost of quality. And this is part of what we call cost management. And cost management, we need to make sure that we monitor quality, time, and theory of constraints with related to cost management. So let's take a look at the question. So you've got a company called Safe Writer, and what do? They make car seats for children from newborn to 2 years old. So I'll just highlight car seats. Company's worried about one of its competitors has recently come under public scrutiny because of the product failure. Historically, Safe Writer's only problem with its car seat is with its stitching in the straps. The problem can usually be detected and repaired during the internal inspection. The cost of the inspection is $5 and the repair cost is $1. All 100,000 car seats were inspected last year. Of that 100, 5% were found to have problem with stitching in the straps during the internal inspection. Another 2% of the 10,000 had problems with stitching, but the internal inspection did not discover them. So basically what they're saying is that the company made 100,000 car seats, and when they go through the quality control process, they were able to detect 5% of the 100,000 before they actually got shipped to customers. But unfortunately, 2% of what got shipped to customers actually had problems with the stitching that the internal quality inspection did not discover them. Now, defective units were sold and shipped to customers. And of course, when they are shipped back to Safe Writer for repair, the shipping cost is $10 and the repair cost is $1. So it's the same repair cost for inspecting it internally. The difference here is that they incur an extra $10 of shipping cost. However, the out-of-pocket costs are not the only other cost of defect not discovered in internal inspection. 20% of external failure is resulting from negative word of mouth, which means that we're going to lose them as customers, and the amount of contribution margin is $500 for each 20% of external failure. So the first part is calculate the appraisal cost. Second part asks us to calculate the internal failure cost. The third part is to calculate the cost of external failure cost. And then they're asking us to determine, essentially number 5 is the cost of quality. So I'm going to come back to 6 and 7, but let's look at what is cost of quality. So in cost management, cost of qualities have 4 categories. And these 4 categories are prevention cost, appraisal cost, internal failure cost, and external failure cost. So what are prevention costs? These are support activities with the purpose to reduce the number of defects. So this area of the quality control department will focus on looking for quality, inspecting, and perhaps training the employees. So this would include quality control training. This would include the process of inspecting the actual product. So there's going to be some sort of processing steps that employees would have to follow to provide this quality control stamp. And of course, there's going to be a lot of statistical process control activities, which allows us to determine what percentage of each unit of each batch we need to test, depending on how much defect that we find in other batches. So there's a lot of statistical process control activities that goes on in the prevention cost area. Appraisal cost is cost incurred to identify defective products before the products are actually shipped. So this one will include things like testing and inspecting all incoming raw material product, testing and inspecting all final product. It could be a testing machine, the amortization of testing machine. It could be individuals in a testing department that would physically pick different items in each batch of what they're testing, perhaps, and do the actual testing process. So that's the appraisal cost. Now, internal failure costs are costs incurred as a result of identifying defects before they're actually shipped. So these would be like items that are either reworked or spoilage. They would be included in the internal failure cost. Or if you found that these items are not at that level of quality at the customer level, they either scrap them or rework them or spoilage. So that would be what they call internal failure cost. External failure costs are costs associated once the product are actually in the hands of the customer. We need to figure out what is the total cost to get the product back and fix it. So there would be a lot of warranty piece to this section of the external failure cost. It could be things like cost of field servicing and handling complaints. So this would be your customer service. It could be product recall. So all of those shipping costs, all of the potential lost sales could be included in this external failure cost. The key to these 4 categories of quality control costs is you want to try to put as much of your resources at these 2 levels of the quality control, the 4 categories of quality cost. The more money you spend here, the less money will be incurred in these 2, and these are very expensive. You can see that product recall, as you can see in a lot of the news, when you have a product recall, a lot of brand gets damaged through the recall process. Government interventions come in, perhaps trying to kind of manage your production process, particularly if your product creates a problem with the consumer. The government may come in, which means that this area of cost could be a lot higher. So you want to try to minimize these and try to put much of the resources here, because once you fix it, once you figure out before you send it out to customer, then the amount of external failure cost and internal failure cost will be much lower. So let's answer this question. So the first part, it's asking us for appraisal cost. An appraisal cost essentially is the inspection, right? So we need to be able to inspect the product. So the inspection, we know it's $5, the cost for the inspection, times 100,000 car seats. Now, next is they're asking us to calculate the internal failure cost. An internal failure cost, essentially, if you remember, these would be the rework items that we found before it got shipped to the customer, and we need to be able to fix it before it actually goes out to a customer. And those are what we call rework cost. And for Safe Rider, that would be 5%, remember, 5% of 100,000 units were reworked, and the rework cost is $1. Now, the third part is asking us for out-of-pocket external cost. The out-of-pocket external cost would be only the repair cost and the shipping. it would not include future lost sales, because that's really part in the question in part 4. But that's part of the out-of-pocket cost, isn't it? Or that's part of the external failure cost, I mean. So this one is, so 2%, we're told that 2%, okay, of the product, so let's come back to the facts again. 2% of 100 had problems in which the internal inspection did not discover. And 20% of the external, sorry, that's just 2%, right? So I'm kind of jumping ahead here. So it's 2% times 100,000 times, remember, we had to spend $10 for shipping and $1 for rework. For number 4, we need to calculate the opportunity cost. Of external failure. And that would be equal to the lost future sales. And that would be, now we know that 2% of the 100,000 were car seats that were sent out to a customer, and we're told that 20% of these customers will have a negative word of mouth, and that will generate a loss of contribution of $500 per unit. So this would be 400, so it would be 2,000 times 20 is 400 car seats times 500 contribution. So that's number 4. Number 5 says, what is the total cost of quality? So total cost of quality is a combination of these 4 categories: prevention, appraisal, internal failure, and external failure. That's essentially what we're asked, and that's essentially the sum of these costs. So we know that the 500 came from the internal inspections. I'm going to label that as number 1. Plus the internal failure of 5,000. Label that number 2. Plus 22,000 of out-of-pocket external costs. That's number 3. Plus 200,000 of opportunity cost of external failure. That's number 4. So altogether, the total cost of this is $727,000. Now let's look at number 6. So number 6 says, Safe Rider is concerned with a high upfront cost of inspecting 100,000 units. It is considered an alternative internal inspection plan that will cost only $1.50 per car seat. During the internal inspection, the alternative techniques will only detect 2.5%, not 5%, of the car seats, the stitching problem, and the other 4.5 will be detected after it gets shipped to the customer. So we've got, so basically what we're saying that, you know what, it's so much money to spend on upfront inspection costs of $500,000. So we saw that in the first part, right? We spent $500,000. Can we reduce that? If we did, it's going to create a higher amount of reject that remains undetected. The question is, should we reduce the cost, and what's the effect? So essentially what we're asked to do is they're asking us to recalculate the cost of quality using the alternative technique. So appraisal costs, it's only $1.50 instead of the $5. So you can see that we're spending $150,000 less. We're spending $500 now, $150,000, so $350,000 less. Internal failure is 2.5%, which was 5%, times 100,000 times $1. So we're only fixing, so because we're spending less, we're only detecting essentially half of the internal failure cost. The third one is, let me just write down A, B, and then C would be the out-of-pocket, right? External cost. That would be, remember it was 2%, now it's 4.5% times 100, so it's much more, times 10 plus 1. And the opportunity cost of external failure is, we had 4.5 times 100,000 car seats, which is 4,500 car seats. Now, in comparison to times 20% is 900. In comparison to 400 from the previous example, times 500 is the lost contribution, we get 450,000. Now, so the cost of quality is 652. Now, in comparison to the first part, item number 5, that was 727. So the question is, what factors? So what is the total cost? Should we do it? Well, clearly, if we're looking at just a quantitative 652 versus 727, this is obviously, using the alternative technique is probably the best, or the best financially for the company. Now, number 7 says, what factors other than the cost should Saferider consider before changing the inspection technique? So there's a couple of things that we might want to consider here for number 7. So first of all, the idea of brand, right? Brand recognition and any damage due to a recall. Now, we know the external failure, okay, goes from 2% to 4.5%. This is external failure. And that goes up by 225% increase. So we go from 2 to 4.5. And this may result in a cost greater than the lost contribution of $500. So I think when the assumption in this case says that we're going to get this loss of contribution, but it's going to be more than that. Because clearly when you lose that, you lose all the momentum that you gain through advertisement, through brand recognition in the marketplace, and perhaps you may lose any customer relationship or vendor relationship. So I think this is probably understated. The second item that they should worry about is, which we did not take into account, is lawsuits. Remember, what are we making? We're making car seats, right? Car seats. So it could be lawsuits with multiple damages that are being sued to the company. And C, because we're dealing with, if it's not food product, in this case it's child safety, we're going to have some government concerns. Government interventions and concerns. And that in itself, we don't want government to come in and start telling us what to do with our products, because that would definitely eat into our profitability, our contribution margin. Okay? Thank you.